Puri hea tō aroaro ki te rā, tukuna tō ātārangi, kia taka ki muri I a koe, puri he tō mata ki tēnei puna atata o te ao huri nei, tukuna o whakaro kia rere. Welcome to Mata with me, Mihingarangi Forbes, brought to you by te Māngai Pāho and the Public Interest Journalism Fund. Joining me on the show is Professor Ella Henry and Shane Te Pou. But another government minister, Kiri Allan, has resigned her portfolios and announced she will not be standing at the next election following a Sunday night car accident where she was charged with careless driving and refusing to accompany a police officer. She also failed a blood alcohol test. We will discuss that issue and what it means for the government shortly. Engari, hei tukatuku I te wānanga ka toro atu ki te rōpū ka kāriki. The Green Party has released its Māori land policy in the run-up to the election. Hoki Whenua Mai aims to return stolen land and private ownership to Māori, end perpetual leases that lock Māori out of their own land and prevent the acquisition of Māori land under the Public Works Act. Hoki Whenua Mai will also remove the 2008 deadline on historical treaty claims implemented during Helen Clark's reign. To discuss this and how the policy will work and how committed Te Rōpū Kākāriki is to it, I'm joined via Zoom by Greens List MP Teanau Tuiono. Tēnā koe e te tungane.
Tēnā koe o tira, tēnā koutou katoa.
Can I begin with Kiri Allan's resignation? She's announced she will no longer stand this election. How o whakaro?
Tēnā pairi taku nākai, ki te whakaro ake au mō tōku hoa. I'm sad. Kiri Tapu is a friend of mine, and I want what's best for her. I want what's best for her, what's best for her whānau, and just understanding the immense stress and pressure she's been under as well. Te tumanako nui ka hoki e ki tōna manga kia pūri ai nā hau o tāwhiri mate. All the best to her, and I join with all of her friends and whānau to wishing her all the best in her journey, but ko te mea nui kia piki te oranga ki ai.
Kia ora, waiho era kōrero ki reira. It is the fourth minister who has resigned in a matter of 4 to 5 months. Is there still hope, do you think, for the left?
Always going to be hopeful. The left is built on hope and aspiration, and for us in the Greens, it's about sort of really landing on our values and to keep pushing ahead as well. And I hope that's coming through to our people and to the voters out there as well. The alternative to that, from my perspective, with the National and the ACT government, that would be a massive leap backwards. And so what we're saying is, hey, look, we've got a vision here which is about people and planet. It's about making sure that we address the climate emergency that we're in as well, and also acknowledging the biodiversity emergency we're in as well, and over all of that, the urgency of poverty, and making sure that we organise ourselves in a good way, in a practical way. And so that's what we're putting out there in this election. Those ideas, and I hope people get on board the waka.
Kia ora, me kōrero taua e pāna ki tēnei kaupapa Hoki Whenua Mai. Let's talk about the policy Hoki Whenua Mai. It will allow the tribunal to make recommendations about privately held land, again for settlement. Set the record straight, is this all private land?
Well, the Waitangi Tribunal used to have be able to make recommendations for private land to make sure that the Crown will be able to address that. So we're returning and giving the Waitangi Tribunal back that ability to do that, and sort of acknowledging that for most of the land within Aotearoa is in private hands, but some of these places have waihi tapu, some of these places have historical sites of significance. So finding a pathway for whānau to actually be able to find ways to get that whenua back, and also finding a way to at least have the conversation with the people who have that land at this particular point in time. I think that's really important. From our perspective, the treaties cannot be settled. They must be honoured. And I'm just mindful of the work of the late great Moana Jackson, who really reinforced that for us, but also for many people in my generation as well. So what our whole Whenua Mai policy is about, trying to find those pathways for for land to be returned to Māori, which supports what's already there.
A former ACT MP, Stephen Frank, says it's radical and it's concerning. When you talk about those private lands, are these up for discussion, or are these just land where they're coming up for sale?
What we've found in talking with people, as people start to get more of an understanding about how land loss happened within Aotearoa, what we found surprising is that some people have actually, Pākehā have actually been acknowledged the loss of Māori land and are actually interested in finding ways for this land to be given back to Māori, to be given back to hapu as well. So there is definitely an awareness of that out there, and it's about trying to find those pathways to enable those very, very good conversations to happen as well. So I don't see it as radical. All I see it is honouring the treaty, to actually living up to the aspirations of Te Tiriti o Waitangi.
Your policy also wants to end perpetual land leases. Some people might even be surprised that we still have perpetual land leases. Why is it still happening? And can you give us an example of what a perpetual land lease is and where it is and what might happen?
Well, perpetual land leases came in from the UK, but they actually ended in the UK around about 100 years ago. So it was a mechanism in order to actually take Māori land. So there will be a lease put on the land. So in all intents and purposes, the Māori landowners will have their name on it, but they wouldn't have control over it. And so you have many whānau, and there's my understanding, around about 26,000 hectares, probably more, in perpetual leases, where you'll have a whānau, their name is on the land, but they can't do it. They don't have the mana whakahaere for the whenua. So we need a pathway to actually end perpetual leases, and that's what our commitment is. Hey, look, these are not good. They're not just. We need to end perpetual leases. Let's find a pathway for that land to go back to those farmers, back to those Māori landowners, so they can actually do what they want to do with that whenua as well, because it's not right.
Recently we did hear about some of those perpetual land leases in places like Waipiro Bay and Te Puhi Springs, Tokomaru, and further up the coast, and they had been taken under the native township. So, when they were starting in the late 1800s to build towns up there, they're still under perpetual land leases. It sounds crazy, but what's stopping it from being returned?
Well, exactly. What's stopping it? There's been a couple of reviews. The last one that came out was in 1994, and the recommendation in that report was to end perpetual leases. Well, that clearly didn't happen as well. So we're just kind of acting on the recommendations and on reports like that came out, that we're looking at this whole issue, and it's about trying to put a pathway in place so that whenua can go back to the whānau.
Is it similar to what happened when we saw the Taranaki farmers, drive in their tractors down to Parliament in the late 90s, I think it was, over the land leases that were coming to fruition down there, and I think the government came to some kind of arrangement there. Is that what you're looking to, a potential new government to be, to come up with a solution, a financial solution?
Actually, I think I was here that day. That's a while back now, when they drove up onto the steps of Parliament as well. Yes, but for Māori, and so it's important for that pathway, because it isn't fair on any metric. Perpetual leases were phased out of the UK, where we got these things ages ago. That needs to happen here as well. We can put those pathways in place so that whānau can get their whenua back. I think it's really important.
You've got a figure about 350 million to start. The panellists here were just talking about in the break, that's 35 houses in Auckland. It's not a big amount.
No, it's a start. We've got to start somewhere. So part of that, one of the ideas we've also got is setting up a commission of inquiry to look at into dispossession and redress. So that'll be supporting the work that the Waitangi Tribunal has been doing for a number of years. But we need to find out actually how much whenua and how it was taken. So, for example, last week I asked the Minister for Land Information about what he knew about how much Māori land had been taken under the Public Works Act. He couldn't give me a definitive answer, because where do whānau go to find out how whenua was taken? Do we know how much whenua was taken under the Public Works Act and just the latest iteration of the Public Works Act? Well, we don't actually know. So it's important to actually get a line of sight over the the state of the disposition of Māori land. And the other thing that we want to do is to stop the Public Works Act from taking Māori land. This won't be new for many Māori, but because the Public Works Act has been used for generations to take land off Māori. And I was actually got some communications from somebody that worked in the Māori Land Court where they pointed out actually it was easier for the government to take Māori land because on one hand you've got multiple owners and sometimes they don't know who the multiple owners are. And then on the other hand, you might have someone who's on a farm where it's just one person that owns it or one family to own it. And so it's easier for them to stand up to stop their land being taken, but less so for Māori land to be taken. So Māori land was often taken and often not compensated as well. This cannot continue to happen. It must end.
Teanau, the new slogan is "The time is now," and that's around the climate change emergency. If you were to, have the numbers to form the next government, would you have bottom lines on climate change? Because some would say, you kind of had the power to do that in the last term, and you didn't really get much traction.
Well, there's been different numbers. There was different numbers in 2017. There was another political party that were involved in those negotiations, and the negotiations heavily skewed their way. And 2020 election, Labor had the majority. So
have you got bottom lines this time around? Bottom lines?
All of the stuff, so including Hoki Whenua Mai, from our perspective, will form part of the negotiations, but it's up to the party to do that. So if the numbers fell our way, well, all of the policies that we've been announcing would be in the mix in terms of what those negotiations would be. But ultimately, if the numbers go away, that would be a question for the party in terms of what we could try to get out of a possible government formulation.
Tēnā koe. Kia ora. Ko Teanau Tuiono tērā hoi anō, kia tahuria ki tātou inainei ki te pai tōranga pū. Let's talk to two experienced political commentators, Professor of Indigenous Development, Dr. Ella Henry, and Shane Te Pou, tēnā kōrua. Ko hoki a Kiri tapu ki ona pai maunga, kia pūri ai ia i ngā hau o tāwhiri mātia. 2 years ago, Kiri tapu was given a 13% chance of survival after a cervical cancer diagnosis. She underwent months of treatment and returned to work. Then recently she came under scrutiny from the opposition for alleged poor working relationships with some staff. It came after her community was devastated by Cyclone Gabrielle, as her relationship ended with a long-term partner and as she herself recognised she was struggling with her mental health. Well, we are recording this at midday, and so we've just learned that Kiri Allan will not be standing again in this election. What are your thoughts on the whole kaupapa?
I'm sad for Kiri, I'm sad for her whānau, I'm sad for her local supporters. That's where I'm from. My sister is very active in her electorate, so is my brother. She's a good soul, but unfortunately we do make choices, whether it's under mental stress or whatever, and there was no coming back for Kiri Tapu. That's the reality after Sunday, and probably a wise decision in terms of starting her life afresh, not standing for re-election. I think that seat was naturally national anyway, so winning it back would have been very tough, and I just hope that she's able to draw the line in her life and move forward. But, maybe not today, but I think we have to have a kōrero about the brutality of Parliament, particularly in terms of how Māori women are treated or mistreated. And this goes way back, I can remember some of the crap that Whiti Te Rakani Sullivan had to put up with. And we fast forward to 2023, and I've never seen any of the vileness and ugliness that Nanaia Mahuta had to put up with. So, there's a big important kōrero to be had here, Mihi and Ella.
Yeah, Ella, some might argue, and I've heard plenty of people argue that, you put your hand up to be an MP and this is what you have to do. What are your thoughts around that?
And that's true, that's absolutely true. However, we have to remember that Māori, amongst all Indigenous peoples, are probably amongst the most in terms of political representation. And if we are going to put our people forward, I think there's something that has to happen at the community level, at the whānau level, whānau hapu iwi, that when we put these people forward, we are prepared to wrap around them. Because, clearly Kiri Tapu and Aroha Atu Ki Aia had a break that she was not able to cope with. You don't know when you go into Parliament what your breaking point will be, and so there's not only infrastructure needed around you when that happens from within Parliament, but also, you know, the broader community that she works with and she's a part of. And so I'd like to see that we take on board our responsibility as whānau to stand behind those people. That's what true Māori leadership is. It's not who's out the front, it's who's out the back supporting the pai.
It sounds great, but like, how would you work that into the current system, that your hapori or your hapu, your iwi, or the people that support you actually get to have a say to remove you when they can tell you're unwell?
I mean, I think that, as Shane has said, we need to look at some structural reform. I think that Parliament is increasingly open to dealing with the issues around bullying, around MP training and preparation, particularly for new ministers. So there's no reason why we could not weave some kind of fabric around not just Māori, but lots of other refugees, women, different communities who get put forward by a community who then have to stand back and leave them alone in that toxic environment that is Parliament. And maybe that's around parliamentary reform.
And, you know, Kiri Tapu's not the first to struggle with mental health while, you know, serving. You know, we all remember former leader Todd Muller did the same and bowed out. And so it's interesting because today the National Party leadership has suggested that there's some kind of not a warrant of fitness, that's not the right word, but that you're assessed by a professional before you return if you've got mental health issues. How would that work?
It wouldn't. It would not. I think it's just a glib, off-the-cuff comment that hasn't been studied, probably has no clinical support. And, you know, what about folks that are already in there? You know, that, and in fact, what it will do, if you are feeling unstable, or if you're feeling mentally unwell, you're just going to shut up and you're not going to share your issues with people. So it actually will stigmatise people with mental health issues. And remember when Todd Muller went off leader for 55 days, took, I think, 5 to 6 weeks off, and then said he was going to retire and then came back? What did the Prime Minister of the day say at the time? I wish him well. And what did Luxton say yesterday? This is a badge. This is the question, the judgment of the Prime Minister. Sometimes you've got to take the politics out of it, and I think Luxton has failed on both accounts.
So let's go back to Christopher Luxon's suggestion. As somebody with experience with mental health, Ella, Shane says it won't work. What are your thoughts?
I completely agree. If you suffer, and as I have in the past for a range of reasons with mental health issues, the reality is you do not know what is going to break you. I mean, it's a truism. Crazy people don't know they're crazy. But also broken people don't know they're broken. And if they're trying desperately to prove to everybody that they're better, stronger, fitter, then often the person they're deluding is themselves first. So no certificate or warrant of fitness is going to gauge that. Every context is different. But I do think it is important to have the kind of support around her that clearly it seems was there, but also to, as I said, to ensure that there is whānau that's able to come in as well and tautoko in a formal, structured way, I think protects that person who is on the threshold of catastrophe.
We have talked about the reaction of Christopher Luxon. How do you think the Prime Minister has responded to this scenario?
Well, I think he responded yesterday with empathy, a sense of loss in terms of one of his talented ministers who had that we all collectively had a lot of hope for. There was no coming back once she was charged, particularly around the police issue. Once she was charged with that, there was no coming back, and I just think he played it as with the only way he could, given the cards that were dealt to him.
Other leaders? Your response to other leaders?
I was pleasantly surprised at the empathetic response of
Yes.
David Seymour on the radio yesterday. I think everybody understands that this is a human being in trauma, and apart from the dark denizens of the interweb, most people, I think, have been relatively understanding of the fact that we are watching a person that we had great hopes for, with a huge workload for a young person, still young, still rangatahi i te ao Māori, and we've watched, her become very unwell. So I was pleasantly surprised by the empathy displayed across the political spectrum.
Do you think there's some room in there for a mental health minister or ministry?
Well, I mean, I think we desperately need a mental health ministry for the country, and I mean, you know, Mike King's been arguing for that for decades. But whether it's just to focus on those in Parliament, I think that's kind of a narrow bandwidth. But I would like to see a better representation around mental health issues in this country, because we know it's a big issue. It's going to grow as society becomes more alienated, and perhaps that's timely.
Kapa, let's reflect on Teanau Tuiono's policy. Hoki whenua mai, what do you both make of it?
Well, Frank said it was radical. It's actually not that radical. All it just simply says is that the tribunal can make a recommendation. It means that government officials can get into formal negotiations with private owners. Often private owners in the position where they want to have a facilitation anyway, and there are instances where it's worked. I don't think it's that radical. I think it just gives an ability to right another injustice, and there is injustice upon injustice. I think the Public Works Act, it's about time. You know, we can go back to the Second World War. Just before the Second World War, let's take Taranaki. Much of the land was confiscated through the Public Works Act. And what was the next step? The next step, people went to war, Māori and Pākehā. Pākehā came back and got farms. Our people didn't. So, you know, you don't have to reach that far back in our history to see a real injustice. So it's timely.
It's timely. You'd support the Land Commission?
I think it's timely. You know why perpetual leases were put an end to 100 years ago in England? Because serfdom come to an end. If you end perpetual leases in Aotearoa, New Zealand, it means people can do simple things like go to the bank, get a loan, build a whare on it, start up an enterprise. I think it's very pragmatic, and it's not revolutionary at all. It's just about saying, this is your whenua, use it as you see fit.
Talking about just settlements, as somebody who's been heavily involved in many settlements, your own included, what do you make of that kōrero?
I admire it in principle. I mean, there's not enough money in there to really address the true loss. However, some money being associated, I said this at the end of the settlement of our claim, because there was a chunk of land that was sold under very spurious conditions in the early stages after Te Tiriti. And I genuinely believe the most important outcome of a treaty settlement is not the financial redress, it is the historical account. And if we can have the true story of how that land was taken, how it was lost, how it was alienated, that in future generations is what we build our aspirations on and have a moral high ground. You know, I remember the Manganui Bluff and all of the contention around that. Eventually, resolution was found, and a new relationship was created between the Pākehā and the Māori in that community. So we have to use the treaty claim not just to claw back, but also to build new knowledge about the future.
And I have hope, if we can get this sorted, maybe our churches will come to the party.
Oh, he kaupapa mō tērā. You know, for those who aren't involved in settlements, and some who are kind of rolling their eyes at this, you know, giving all the stolen land back, how in treaty settlements, is it rare if you get land back?
No, it's not rare, and you know, it's. I
mean, are there some iwi that haven't had any land return?
Yeah, well, I don't know the intricacies of it, but there are plenty of instances where a payment is easier found than return of land, particularly if it is in not only private interest but also dock. That can be very hard to unwind, and churches, which I've sort of mentioned. I know we don't want to go there today. But you've got to have all sorts of mechanisms to deliver overall justice. Let's
stay on land and Waitangi Tribunal, because New Zealand First turned 30. Winston Peters launched his new attempt, and they've got Kathy Costello in there, who's formerly of Hobson's Pledge, and she's suggesting that we get rid of the Waitangi Tribunal, end it. What do you think?
I'd like to think that if she got into any kind of real power, that she would learn the true history of the tribunal. And I think about other national leaders of the past. Graham's a classic example, Jim Bolger, who when they first went into Parliament had a particular stance, and after many years of working with us realised, oh my gosh, Māori have a point. And so for somebody who is Māori but may not know as much about her history as some of us, I think that's a good journey to go on. I mean, Hobson's Pledge is predicated on the notion that Hobson said, he iwi ko tahi tātou. The fact that 500 Māori didn't give a toss about what he was saying and that's not what they agreed to is irrelevant to the people in Hobson's Pledge. So they just need to learn more about our history, I think.
So Shane Jones is back, Jenny Markroft joins him, former Mata commentators there. Are they encouraging voters to take our country back and question, and I guess the question is whose country?
Yeah.
And back from who?
I just imagine if it was Te Party Māori and they'd used let's take our country back, that, you know, the police would be called, the Red Squad will be reformed. No, I just think that this is the dance of the desperate. Now, not only did they at their conference or whatever you want to call it over the weekend, did they talk about these issues, but they want to build El Salvadorian type jails. They want to do away with the Waitangi Tribunal, which we know is a legal construct. You know, as the Supreme Court has said, and every other court in the land, a lot of these things are undoable. What they're doing is they're going after a small clique of vote to get them over.
From where on the political?
I think the elderly centre right. It's the same sort of vote that ACT are going after. You've got New Zealand First going after, and then you've got the smaller, desperate sort of anti-vax type parties and all the same. I just don't think there's enough votes in it. And also, I know some of those people, you know what, I don't even think they believe that rubbish themselves.
It's pretty busy in that middle block. Before we go, we've got a couple of minutes. You know, what do you think Kiri Allan will be remembered for in terms of what she did in Parliament?
I'd like to think that we will remember those great moments of, particularly this year, as she stepped up around the floods, the environmental crises, that the strong stand she's taken on justice issues, not just for Māori but for New Zealanders. I had the pleasure of knowing her as a student 20 years ago. I knew straight away she's bright, vivacious. She'll come back. It's just a shame that her political career has ended under a cloud.
Thoughts?
She will, unfortunately, at this point in time, she'll probably be known from her exit. I think the best years are in front of her, and she should take every opportunity, as her mum said, take a deep breath, get on with life, and just build and start again. And what we know about Māori, and particularly Māori women, is we're a resilient bunch.
We like to make comebacks.
Yeah.
As Te Anau said, let the winds of Tāwhiri Mātia wash over you and look after you. Tēnā kōrua, thank you so much for joining us today. We didn't get through half the things we wanted to do. It was a very busy day. Tēnā kōrua, he moana puke e ekinga e te waka. Ki te aro tātou, ki te taharangi, ka mōhi wake, he rā anō ki tua. Kanui te mihi ki te puna whakatongarewa me te Māngai Pāho. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back in a fortnight. Nō hora mai.